watching Floyd Steinberg's YouTube channel. Today, the Woovebox and its Firmware 2.0, which coincides with the release of an updated hardware. And I have the list of new features here. And you know what? I'm just going to focus on one feature I like most, and that is the updated synth engine, which is said to sound better and more hi-fi now. And while creating some sounds, I will tell you about the other new features in a bullet point list. So if you think that's a good idea, please join me in this video. Here we go. Okay, so my idea for this video is I'm going to create a typical analog brass sound on firmware 1 first, then install firmware 2 and do the same thing again, and then we can compare. Within the first 3 minutes I'll briefly walk through the sound design process, which hasn't changed fundamentally in version 2. Apologies for the shutter speed mismatch, which causes the flickering in the first minute of this video. It'll get better later. Also, I recorded this without a script and cut out awkward pauses and all those later. So let's turn this on. We want to adjust the overall volume, hold down play and then turn the knob until we've reached maybe 80 or something. And now we're in song mode. I want to choose an empty song here, so hold play and press 4 for example. We're on the globals page here, so we want to go to the track. We want to work on the sound in, so hold down the select button and press a button. We've chosen the chord track, encoder in 1. The first thing you want to do is go to the globals page, turn the encoder right twice. Now, on this globals page there are 3 menu options you want to take a look at. The first one is number 3, to choose the algorithm your synthesizer will work in. At the moment this is subtractive, but you can also choose FM in different styles, ring modulation, amplitude modulation. I'm going to stick with subtractive here. Now let's go to the oscillator page by turning the encoder. And first thing I want to do is to select a supersaw sound. Next thing, I'm going to go to the amplitude page, adjust the amplitude envelope, hold down the first button to change the attack phase. And I want a longer release on button 4. I want a little less sustain and a little less decay. Let's go to the second oscillator, bring up the volume. Okay, and I want to have another wave shape here, supersaw wave 2. And let's detune this a bit. Return to the amplitude page, and now we can use this row here for the amplitude envelope of oscillator 2. And the release. Let's take a look at the filter. Go to the filter page by turning the encoder. Let's use a filter here, for example, a low pass filter. Now let's reduce the frequency. Here we can edit the filter envelope, attack, and release. Filter envelope depth. On the globals page, let's add some chorus and delay and reverb. Okay, now let's do this on firmware 2. Let's install the new firmware. Hold the chord button and switch on your Woovebox. If for some reason the Wooveconnect webpage doesn't work, you can download the sysex file to your smartphone and send it to the Woovebox with the sysex utility. On Android as shown here, you also need the MIDI and BTLE app and the Timeslip app for sending the firmware update. This way, you can also downgrade the firmware if you must. So, while I'm working on the patch, let me briefly remind you what an incredible achievement the Woovebox is. Not only did its developer manage to squeeze out 16-part multi-timbrality and polyphony from its CPU, he then proceeded to add a 16-track sequencer that can store 16 songs, each with 16 patterns containing 16 steps. And if that wasn't enough, the box features 3 oscillator, virtual analog and FM synthesizers, a sampler, and a healthy amount of filters and effects. Not only can the Woovebox sequence your other gear, but with the latest firmware you can now use your other gear to control the Woovebox. For example, here's me playing the chord track on a MIDI keyboard while doing filter sweeps with the grid controller. The nice thing is you can get all the new features on your existing Woovebox for free, even MIDI in, if your box was built within the last 365 days. And while remembering how to access some of the more arcane functions might be non-trivial, it's very quick and easy to create a track. Press the encoder, select the track you want to work on, press play, choose a note, hold right and choose the step where you want the note to be placed. Then repeat this with any track you want to use. Really, I could go on for days explaining what this box can do, but at this point in its development it's probably quicker to list what this box can't do. For example, it can't knit you a pair of woolly socks. But any trick in the book of a modern electronic music producer, this box has you covered. For example, this is the vocoder. However, some people didn't like its distinctly lo-fi sound, and Update 2.0 promises the box will now sound more hi-fi. So let's compare my warm pad sound on version 1 versus version 2. So what's the takeaway here? Well, I'm going to be completely honest with you. In my ears, the difference isn't that pronounced. I could barely hear it. Maybe on that lead sound, which had those arpeggiated square wave in the background, I could spot the faintest of differences there because the Firmware 2 seemed to be a bit smoother there in its delivery of that patch. So this video was a little bit all over the place because in the cutting room I noticed the whole premise seemed to crumble. And maybe I should have focused on other things. So all in all, the Woovebox still is an absolutely astounding device. For around $250 you get a multi-timbre polyphonic synthesizer with a 16-track sequencer that now can be controlled with MIDI controllers, making it so much more valuable in live performances, for example. And even during the development of Firmware 1, a lot of features were added since I last showed this device on my channel. And the sheer amount of functions built into this little black square here is mesmerizing. And even if the hi-fi update didn't make that much of a difference in the real world, at least to my ears, the synth engines on the Woovebox have been pretty great sounding from the start. So I think you should take a look at the webpage, link is in this video's description, and I also can recommend Freebeat's video, which should be on screen here. He did an awesome drum solo using the new DJ effects. Update, I talked to Ivo about my findings and he said, yeah, it might be hard to spot the improvements when listening to a full mix, but in order to prove there has been an improvement, it's the best idea just to play a high-pitched saw wave or listen to the reverb. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm just playing a high-pitched saw wave here and then we can compare Firmware 1 to Firmware 2. Here we go. Yeah, there's some obvious aliasing here. Hear those frequencies that are intruding there? It's quite obvious, really. Now here's Firmware 2. And yes, this sounds much better. I wouldn't call this free of aliasing, but it really is a significant improvement. Yeah, and that's it for today. Woovebox 2.0 with a ton of new features and improved audio quality. So if you think this was a good YouTube video, please do the YouTube thing. If you want to support me financially, you can do so on Patreon or become a channel member. However, you don't want to commit monthly, you can also use the super thanks button under this video. As always, thanks for watching and see you again very, very soon. Bye bye.